Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Running Tales podcast, where we tell the extraordinary stories of everyday athletes. As you all know by now, we are part of the Everyday Athlete podcast network, so please do go and check us out wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Spotify, all the good places. We've got a brilliant series of shows on there, loads and loads of variety, talking about everything from men's mental health to music when you're running, to real cool running stories. So lots and lots of stuff. Today we have a really good a guest to talk to, Justin Cheesman, and Justin has done a whole host of running, from the Chicago Marathon to the Goggins Challenge. And for him, sport is therapy, it's fitness, it's a route towards growth, and a constant challenge that he just simply cannot resist. But things, as I'm sure we'll get into, weren't always that way for Justin. As a young man, he saw running as a punishment, something to be hated, and his dislike of the sport stemmed from, as it does for so many of us, from other sports at school. For him, it was his experience as a collegiate baseball player, where if they made a mistake on the pitch, the team were forced to run. These days, a different thing for Justin. It's something that powers him forward. So listen, folks, let's bring Justin forward without further ado and have a chat about his running career. So, hey, Justin, welcome to Running Tales.
Greg, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. So perhaps let's start at the beginning of that story. You're growing up, you're getting your education, and you're playing some decent baseball, but the coach keeps making you run around the field. What was that like?
As you mentioned, growing up, baseball was my life. I loved it. It was something that our family kind of all got behind. But as you kind of work your way through youth to high school to the collegiate level, one of the as your skills refine, so do maybe some expectations. And then with those expectations of underperformance or even a bad day, as simple as that, it was the next day in practice, or even I can remember one time in college after I pitched. I think we won the game for all intents and purposes, but it had maybe not performed according to plan. So it was we had to go out and run a pole. So in baseball, a pole is from foul pole to foul pole, back and forth is one. And based on our performance and certain standards and benchmarks, we'd have to run those prior to even getting on the bus. So your teammates they're showered, they're on the bus, they're calling their family, they're getting ready to unwind for the trip back home, and you're still out there sludging away in your running shoes trying to get on the bus as soon as possible. But so it was a struggle. I mean, for running for me was nothing I wanted to do at all.
Yeah, and we'll get onto the running you have done, but when you look back on those days now, or I suppose if you were to put yourself in the shoes of yourself then and see what you've done, I mean, would you ever have thought that running would be something that you'd end up enjoying and actually going and seeking out these runs?
No, I mean, I have friends now that I played with, or even coached with later on, that if I'll post something about just having done a half marathon, or even when I did some of the other runs I've done, they'll call or text me and say, man, if there's one person I never thought I'd be seeing doing these things, it was you. I'd go as far as running behind a convenience store and splashing water on me halfway and trying to tell my coach that I had run. I mean, it was a bitter hatred. I mean, those are strong words, but running and I did not get along at all.
Yeah, it's so funny how running is sometimes becomes a thing at school. We all love, whether over in the UK here we're playing a bit of cricket, or what we call football, what you call soccer, or whether
Yep.
over there you're playing American football or baseball and so on. Nobody ever seems to like running. I remember finishing quite deliberately 16th for 3 years in a row in our school cross country, because the top 15 had to go and do a horrible county team race, and I was like, there's no way I'm going to run this to then have to go and run another cross country. I have no interest in doing that.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So when did it all change for you, Justin? What made you suddenly find, hey, this running, it's not so bad?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was once I stopped playing baseball. I played through my first 2 years of college, so I was probably 20 maybe at that time. Then it was probably two things. One is I realized that now I didn't have baseball. I needed to do something else to be active. And then beyond that, a group of friends. I had quite a few friends at that time that had kind of transitioned out of traditional sports, more, aged out, if you will. You can't do certain things once you get to a certain age. And they were runners. It was Saturday morning. What are you guys doing? We're going for a run. And for me, I was like, well, call me when you get back. I'm not going to go do that. So, and then it just got to the point where enough guys that you respect and want to hang out with, or that's what they're doing. So you kind of throw your hat in the ring a little bit, and even that wasn't immediate. That's for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's the follow-up question to it. When did it become? Because for some of us running late in later life, it's like, well, I need to go for a run because I don't know, I'm putting on a few pounds, or
Yeah.
I think I might want to stay fit when I get older. And quite often for some people, that's how it always stays. But for others, like I'm guessing you and I, and probably people listening to this, there's that moment where it kind of clicks. Was there an individual moment for you, or just a bit of overtime?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was. It was a moment, and again, in my mid 20s, I have to admit to maybe not making the best decisions at all times. It was a night out, and a good buddy of mine, it was, woke up next morning bright and early and went for a run. And I was like, "What are you doing? We went to bed 5 hours ago, and why are you running?" And he was like, "You have no idea how great you'll feel afterwards." So
Yeah.
that morning, I get up, very reluctantly get up, put some shoes on, and I'd say we did, I think, 5 mile run, and about mile two and a half. It just kind of clicked to me is that this is more than left, right, or this is more than a way to sweat. This is more than a way to be fit or get active. It was the conversation in that 5 miles, that whether it was recanting the night before or it was just conversation that said, hey, maybe there's something to this where we should be talking more about these runs and on these runs than we should about bar tails or anything else.
Yeah, and that's obviously kind of casual run. I mean, I love that sort of run. We call it a chatty run. And my wife has a run
Sure.
club. We go on a Sunday morning chatty run, and you just talk about shoot the shit, I suppose, about what's happened in the
Yeah.
last week. Um, was there a stage where that developed into thinking, "Hey, I'm either getting quite good at this, or I really like this, and I fancy taking on a few races or challenges"?
Yeah, I mean, I think it fed into that athletic mindset that I always had growing up.
Mm,
Is where runs were like, yeah, great way to decompress and chat, but then it also got to be a way where 3 miles turned into five turned into 10, 10 didn't turn in, and then 10 turns into 13. And then you begin to see that there's events, there's all different types of outlets, whether they're, organized runs or, and then a big piece for me, which we'll probably spotlight on here is the whole idea that there's always a philanthropic or a charitable piece as well, that ties into the running community. So for me, it really just hit me in a couple different, checked a couple boxes, for me personally, from a challenge perspective and then also a serve perspective. So I think it evolved into that, and something that I just really enjoyed.
definitely, I definitely want to get onto some of the sort of charity side of things with your running and with running generally as well. But let's talk a little bit first, perhaps, about some of the events you've taken on, because you've taken on quite a variety of different things, from I think the Chicago Marathon to the Goggins Challenge to
Yeah.
various runs in the middle of the night.
Yeah, I mean, and for me, that's the part I like about running is that there's no rut. There's no really ceiling to what you can do.
Mm,
From everything from starting with the traditional community-based 5K to then increasing your distances and even getting a little competitive internally. Then you start to think about your time differentials and those, but then beyond that, if you do get stale in those means, there's events. I've run the Palmetto 200, which is a race in the States here in South Carolina, where you run across the state of South Carolina. It's a relay, and it's through the night. It takes 25 to 30 hours to complete. And just that idea of there's always something to chase. You never reach the end of a running interest or a running career. There's always something more to chase, which which I love. I just love that aspect of running. I love that aspect of the running community. You know, the moment the guys you traditionally run with want to be done at a half marathon, there's 10 more people that would run a marathon with you and encourage you in that and train with you in that. You know, so for me, it's just that endless pursuit of challenging the body. And you know, as far as I did Escape the Cape, that's a triathlon in Cape May, New Jersey. You go a mile offshore and you jump off a ferry and you swim to the beach. And the conditions are what they are. Sometimes you wash up a mile down shore. Sometimes you swim quietly and nicely to shore. But you know, for me, it's just I've always been obsessed, you know, what the human body's potential is, and challenging those norms of why we shut it down prior to that. So, and I think that's where running and I ended up getting along. It had endless challenges for me, and I had endless pursuits for it. So it
Yeah.
was really, I feel like that's where the love affair began, to be honest.
Yeah, and I know you kind of have a entrepreneurial spirit, and you're very much believing in the I suppose the power of personal growth as well. And I think for you, running comes firmly into that category. And how does running help you grow as a person?
You know, I think first and foremost, it is that unobtainable. You know, so for me, that's it's always there's always a pursuit, and for me, you know, whether it's relationally, professionally, physically, you know, I feel like there should always be something we're pursuing. You know, whether that's the next race, whether that's the next opportunity that you have in front of you from a professional standpoint, or whether that's just, pursuing a better relationship, whether it's with your wife or children or whatever that is. You know, so for me, it's that relentless pursuit that in all aspects of my life.
Yeah, and I was thinking of a question as you were talking there, and I've kind of got halfway through it in my head, and I'm thinking this is going to sound like one of those awful interview questions where you say, tell me of a moment when you, but I'm going to ask it anyway, and that's kind of like talk me through a time when perhaps you're in
Yeah.
one of those races where it has been hard, and then you've got through, and that's made that difference, that has provoked that growth. And apologies again, that sounds like an interview question.
No, that's okay. I mean, so for me, for me, a big growth moment and a big kind of aha was when I did it was the Chicago Marathon.
Yeah.
With that, it was my first marathon. So to qualify for that, we went through a philanthropic route. You know, most of the major five, if you agree to a charitable cause and raise a certain amount of money, you get admittance into the race. So there's a friend of mine, Josh. He's actually a running coach out in Colorado, but I won't plug him. But he came to me, and his dad had passed from cancer, and at the time, my personal mentor, who helped me grow exponentially in my relationships and my faith, had cancer at the time. So I was able to join him in that endeavor to raise money for cancer awareness, that allowed me to do the Chicago Marathon. But there was moments throughout that race, and anyone that's listening that's done a marathon, a marathon is a gamut of emotion. You know, you start out hot, you're excited, and then everyone that ever ran one told you at mile 16 or 18, you're going to feel like you get hit by a bus. You know, so at mile 18, I was still going strong, and I was like, I'm the greatest marathoner ever, And then at mile 20, everything at once hit me, from a little bit of emotion for why I was running and who I was running for. And then the emotion of, wow, I can't feel my legs, So it was this all encompassing moment of like, emotion of, running is so much more than running, than left, right, left, right. There's a social impact piece. There's a relational piece. There's all of those emotions that you go through. That for me, again, at the end of that race was, I'm never doing this again, to, man, I can't wait to do something again, and it's just that gamut of emotion that life surely brings your way. Like, if you're not in a storm, one's coming, right? And if you've been through a storm, you can look back at that. But for me, it just gives that gamut of emotion. And that race for me was probably one of the most satisfying, but also emotional pieces that I've had running. Um, yeah, so that one got me pretty good from a growth perspective personally. And there's been others more in a professional manner as well, but personal growth, I'd say that was probably the moment.
And it's the sort of thing, I suppose, where you get that next awkward moment in business or in life, or whatever might happen, that you can draw on the strength that you've kind of gained at mile 22.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's the beauty of it. And that's why I think there's carryover, from
Mm,
physical challenge or from running, that there's carryover in the professional world and relational world that allows for that growth. That when, doing hard things, I think has a lot of carryover. And those hard things can be physical,
mm.
in multiple ways, but there is carryover to know that you can do those things.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, Justin, tell us a little bit about some of the philanthropic work that you do, and also how that's connected to the running world, because I know that's something that's very important to you.
Yeah, I mean, so we've tied the two worlds. We've merged them quite a bit over probably the last 4 years, and
Mm,
it really started initially, probably right around the onset of the pandemic. So that was 2020. Memory serves me well. And I had an organization that I had touched base with over in George, South Africa. Life Community Services was the name of that organization, and during the pandemic, especially in that area, South Africa was quite locked down. And this organization, provided some educational opportunities in informal settlements, but also was doing a lot from a feeding perspective. So myself and a buddy of mine, I said, well, what can I do? I sit here and I'm in the U.S. and South Carolina. What can I do? So we came up with this idea, and it was kind of a harebrained idea that I thought maybe one or two family members would get, but mom and Aunt Sally, right? They have to support you. They love you, right? They're your family. So that's really where it started, and it was a 10K, it was a 5K a day, for 100 days, 100 days
yeah,
straight. And what we would do is we'd get individuals that could sponsor those 5Ks, and they could run it with me, which I had a lot of fun with that. Or they could just sponsor it because they wanted to see me. Here in South Carolina, we get some hot days. They wanted to see me run a 5K in 110-degree weather and see if I live. So we had some friends that I think that was the sole motivation. So we did so we ended up raising $10,000,
wow, that's awesome.
over the course of, what is that, 3 months, and then we sent all of that money over, to Life Community Services. It allowed them to remain open in some capacity to feed folks that were in drastic need at that time, when a lot of the even the systems we had in place just weren't accessible to them. And for me, that's probably where it started to say, hey, like, people are interested in this type of thing. People want to do these types of things. Whether it's, if it was a business, we would plug the business and say, hey, thank you so much for supporting our initiative. Go support these guys. So that's really where it started, and then we just started snowballing ideas and figuring out ways that running can be such a platform. I mean, there's so many running. All you have to do is do one, whether it's one of the major five or even just a big time race in your local community, and just see the amount of people that support that
Mhm.
community. It is primed and ready for impact and purpose. So for me, that was a taste of it. And then from there, I just decided that that'd be a great way to leverage two powerful platforms for for the benefit of others.
Yeah.
So
Well, what do you think it is about running that perhaps makes people so keen to support those who are
I,
fundraising for it? Because you don't. I mean, you might have a
I
sponsored
mean,
football stroke soccer match, whatever. But I don't know. Running just seems to
yeah.
be absolutely synonymous with it. Maybe it is because people are thinking, "Oh wow, someone's doing something absolutely horrible. I'll have to give them some money."
Yeah, I mean, and truth be told, I don't know the answer to that question. I guess what I've found maybe through talking to folks like yourself and a lot of other individuals in our community that do run, or even on larger platforms through social media, it just seems to be a common shared heart. I don't know a better way to describe it. I do genuinely think that, during that challenge I just spoke of, I had some buddies that were like, it's worth $100 to me to see you
Yeah.
suffer. I think there's a part of that. Maybe I just need better friends. I'm not sure, but I genuinely do believe that it's a shared heart. It's a shared compassion. It's a shared striving for something more. I don't know, but I think it's a shared heart. The more runners I talk to, the more runners I meet, the more running groups I run with, whatever it might be, even when you and I first connected, I
Mm.
mean, it just seems to be a shared heart.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And what was it like on that as you went through that 5K a day? Because I'm okay, I don't know how hot it was on day one, which could have made it hard. You're probably like, 5K. I've just done the Chicago Marathon, or I could do that's not too bad. And day
Yeah.
two, 5K. But I'm imagining it's that sort of thing that just accumulates. And by day 10, 15, 20, you're like, the last thing I want to do is another 5K.
Yeah, and I think the original intention was I only thought it would go 10 days. Our original intention wasn't a 5K a day for 100
Yeah,
days. Again, truth be told, I don't know if I'd have signed up for that. But it was more one of the aspects too that I felt tied me into the project was at times it was more sacrificial on my time than it was necessarily taxing on my
yeah,
body. Was I had a small business that sponsored, say, five of them, so a $500 donation to the cause. So then it was, I'd have to, in the morning I'd get up and like, oh, I couldn't run this morning, and then I went to work all day, and then I get home and it's family time, and then it's 7:30 at night. But to honor their donation and to honor their stepping out, for a cause, I'd run some at 9 o'clock at
I was
night.
going to say,
So for
what was the
me,
latest it ever got to?
I think that was probably the latest. I did one at 9 o'clock. I had I worked all day, and then I had some type of an engagement after work that I had to attend, which, and in my mind, I'm like, I gotta run, I gotta run, I gotta run, because I chronicled it and I kind of recorded it on my social media, to give a piece of accountability as
Yeah,
well. So when someone donates on a Tuesday, they're like, oh, hey, I donated Tuesday. I didn't see you run.
yeah,
So, I kind of chronicled it on my social media. So yeah, that was probably the latest. And then a couple days, if I missed one on a day, I would do a kind of a double dip. So I would do an AM PM run. And again, for me, it was that idea of it was sacrificial of time more than physical, and then also it was
mm,
accountability. For me to be accountable to those individuals that were stepping out financially. Again, this is pandemic times. There's a lot of uncertainty, but for people to commit to a cause that was beyond them, and again was halfway around the world. We were in the U.S. and this was an organization over in George, South Africa. Um, so for me, it was that tie-in. But yeah, there were some late night runs and some funny looks from my wife of, why are you putting your running shoes on? You should put your like pajamas and slippers on. But she was incredibly gracious in supporting the entire effort. So it was a lot of fun.
yeah. Did you get tempted to go out on day 101, or was what happened was that the slippers were firmly on that day and not coming off?
The premise was that day, yes, but then again, like we had a few businesses. We had one business that's a gentleman I've known well, and they're just big hearts. It's a group of brothers that have a company in our town, and they donated, I think, almost upwards of like $1,000. So I'm super thankful at the time that I'm like, in my head, I'm like, wow, that's 10
Yeah,
runs. How does that work out from timing? And again, the great part that I loved about a lot of it was it was an opportunity for on a lot of instances to run with the individual who donated, and to have I love that idea for running of being, it's a captive ear, it's a captive audience. If there's someone that you want some time with to have a conversation, whether it's professional or whether it's whatever it is, a 5K at a conversational pace. I mean, you got a captive ear for 20 to 25 minutes.
yeah.
So for me, I learned to appreciate that aspect of it as well.
It's
Was
running's
that
going to be the new it's going to be the new golf course. Or
I
the
mean, I
tour.
would love that, because again, I mean, I enjoy the game of golf, but at the end of the day, I feel like I've done more professionally as a result of a run than I've done professionally as a result of a golf match,
Oh wow. Oh, that's cool. And you've
which is probably rare. There's gonna be a lot of golfers that might get angry at that statement, but I feel in my life it's been true.
yeah,
So
I don't know. I can't see. I can't see Donald Trump heading out for a for a 5K anytime, but maybe I'm
No,
not doing
no, no,
it. Maybe I'm
no. There'd be bigger problems with that, I believe.
Yeah, yeah, sure. And I think now that you've got your own business and there's connections with running there through Empower Coffee. Talk us through some of that.
Yeah, so I mean, shortly thereafter that run, seeing some of the differences and some of the changes that were occurring around the world, myself and a good buddy of mine, David, David May, who's over in George, South Africa, we started our own nonprofit, which is called Empower. So it's an international nonprofit, and really what it's gauged around, and I think ties in really well to running and to being active is the idea of empowerment, is the idea of being a platform for allowing someone to overcome a barrier and being a platform for allowing someone to overcome their circumstance. And I've seen that in running so often, and I think the correlation there is really been tremendous. And we as an organization, every November we host an event called Run It Back. And Run It Back is an event where we enlist runners from all over the world. This past year was our fourth annual. And we had runners from as far as Hong Kong. We had a few in the UK, a few in the US, a fair amount in South Africa, from Cape Town to Johannesburg to Durban to George. And it's a 5K a day for 7 days. We encourage the runners to raise money, raise awareness for the organization. And then really at the end of it, it's just to show the connectedness of a running world. And then how can we leverage that? And really at the end, we pick a community champion. This past year, we picked 7 small businesses that were the benefactor of a an inverter, which allows you to charge a battery, basically, that then can run your business. Load shedding is a huge issue in that area of South Africa, where 6 to 8 hours a day they don't have power. So small businesses, just don't have the ability to make a living and to grow their business during those hours. So we wanted to come alongside of them and raise them up in a way to overcome a barrier, and then the run piece, we saw individuals who took the challenge that have never run a 5K in their life and are out running a 5K a day for 7 days. And it was just just a powerful moment of seeing someone overcome a physical barrier personally, but then that also be able to contribute to a professional financial barrier to someone else who they'll never meet, which for me is just like, I love that. That's why we get the question all the time, why you in South Carolina and the US, why do you care about someone halfway around the world? And for me, the ultimate sign of whether it be charity or philanthropic endeavors is, I love the idea of changing someone's life that I'll never, ever meet. And to do that through a running platform, to me, is something that, we run every day. How can we leverage
Yeah,
that?
yeah. No, that's so cool, and I always love the idea of we've done a few sort of charity things ourselves, my wife and I, and what we try and do is almost have two streams running simultaneously that have the same benefits. And one is like, hey, look, if you do this event, you're going to get fit, you're going to enjoy it, you're going to have a chat with people, and you're going to get better at this sport that hopefully you love, or if you hate it, you might come into it. And so that's a personal benefit, that growth, I suppose. But also, by the way, you're going to help all of these people over here as well. And so those two things just seem
Sure.
to dovetail really nicely with running, don't they?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then we've just, even through those events, then what we see is then individuals that run in those events and hear about the cause and hear about some of the things that, whether it's us as an organization or even any organization that's hosting running events or doing those types of things, to see those people then engage at that level as well. But the entry point was running.
Yeah,
The entry point was a personal growth moment that now they've turned into something much bigger. For me, it's a full circle moment of winning in regards to, we can empower on both ends. It's just not the end consumer or the end business owner. It's empowering the individual in that moment as well. Whether it's an accomplishment on, out there pounding the pavement, or is it, the fact that now they're engaged and want to get involved. And we've just seen it to be such a powerful platform that, it'd be undeniable. And and would be foolish of us not to engage with.
Yeah, definitely. And so, do you have any other events in the calendar now? Anything coming up?
So funny you should ask. So I'm getting a little pressure from David, who's our CEO, boots on the ground for Empower over in George, South Africa. He this year is doing his first marathon.
Oh, wow.
I'd like to believe it's because I spurred him on, but we can talk about motivation some other time. But um, so needless to say, we have a huge community project that we're doing in George that we will be doing the grand opening for in October of next year, which just so happens to correspond with the Cape Town Marathon over in South Africa. So needless to say, I'm getting a little pressure, but that's okay. To jump on board with that, but outside of that on the calendar, not really. But I do have a group of 4 guys that I train and run with, and each year we do it's called a Masoji. Have you heard of that?
Oh, do you know what? I have a feeling that somebody mentioned a misogi to me on one of these podcasts not so long ago. Is that like when you do some sort of one extreme challenge every year? Jason's
Yes,
saying they've
exactly.
spoken about it on Enduring Minds, which is one of our sister podcasts on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network, and that is probably where I've heard it. So, folks, listen to the Enduring Minds, and you'll learn more about it. Um, and also, I should listen to it and remember a bit more. But
But yeah, so that's it's a once a year event that you put on your calendar. It's a non-negotiable, and it's something that it's supposed to challenge you in multiple ways. Beyond physically, there should be a mental challenge. It should challenge you on multiple capacities or multiple aspects of your life. And it's done once a year. It's usually done with a group of guys. So we're currently planning ours for this year. Last year we used the Goggins challenge as a challenge in that, and actually with the Goggins challenge that we did last year, we just used the same course as well, almost as that mental piece as well. I saw the same pine tree quite a few times, and ran past the same palm tree quite a few times as
yeah,
well. So for us, that was the mental component of that, was the redundancy of the challenge as well. So those are probably the two for the year. And then, like I said, I have a group of guys that I run with that are known to just drop something in your DM or your text message that says, "Oh, by the way, this weekend we're running the half marathon 2 towns over. So bring your shoes." So
there's nothing better than peer pressure, is there? Never in
that's it's an influence. It is a powerful influence, but again, in the context of like-minded individuals that like to be challenged and do those same things as you enjoy, it's fun to have those groups around you. I'm a firm believer in who you surround yourself with will be a reflection of what your future is. So I think it's a strong testament to those
yeah,
groups out there that are training and running together and accountable. That when the your alarm goes off at 5:30, if 3 other guys say they're in, your chances of saying out go down exponentially. So it's the accountability piece is big.
yeah, definitely. And just going back to that Goggins run, how did you find that as a challenge?
So again, for me, so I mean, I'm sure a lot of people are probably familiar. It's 4 miles every 4 hours for 48
Yeah,
hours. And a lot of there used to be some organized events, I believe, around the challenge, but I wasn't able to find any of those. But so we did it in our neighborhood, the 3 of us. So we have a kind of a 1.5 mile loop, so we're able to double that to get to a 5K distance. And then we have a smaller 1 mile loop as well. And from a physical perspective, having done a fair amount of running, the legs got a little sore, but for me, it was the monotony of knowing that on that clock strikes 4 hours, you're heading out for a 4 mile run for 2 days.
yeah,
And it was the again the sacrificial piece. It was at 2 a.m. on a Saturday morning, night, call it what you will, depending on what your personal preferences are. To get out of to take a quick 1 hour nap and get up and put your shoes on and run, and it's raining, it's dark, it's all those things. And then we ran the same course. So for me, it was the mental component of just that showing up and showing up and showing up. And I missed my alarm one time, and I mean, my phone was blowing up saying, "What are you doing? You're supposed to be in my driveway right now. And I mean, you have a 4 hour buffer, but just that, that accountability piece back to
Mm.
that and the monotony of it, I found to be the most challenging piece.
Yeah, and I think that goes a little bit to what you were talking about earlier with the never-ending challenge of running, because something like that is completely different from running that marathon to running a
For sure.
5K, which we've had so many people on here say is the most horrible and hardest thing they'll ever do when you have to run it flat out and you're absolutely dying by the end of it. And
For sure.
yeah, and I've done ultras at 50K, which I've definitely found inverted commas easier because it's never easy, but easier than some of
No,
the marathons or even the half marathons I've done. And it's such a weird and wonderful sport like that.
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
What's your sort of preferred? Do you have a preferred distance? What's the hardest distance that you've taken on as well?
I mean, the hardest distance for me, I mean, the furthest distance I've done is the marathon distance. I haven't gone beyond
Yeah.
that. My prefer, I love like that 6 to 8 mile, the 10K piece, whether it's trail or road. I just feel I can settle in. I have a comfortable pace that I can get to, and for me, that's the catch up run. That's when I like to go out and do. A lot of times on Sunday mornings, myself and a couple other guys, that'll be like our build up for the week. We'll go out and do 5 to 6 miles on a Sunday morning and just decompress the week, get prepared, get energized for the week to come.
Mm.
Um, but then the relays too. The Palmetto 100 maybe that I spoke about a little bit earlier. I do like that because it is that physical piece of malnutrition, lack of sleep. It's those moments of like realizing how functional you can be in the absence of comfort.
Yeah.
I don't know if that rings true to yourself or maybe anyone that else would listen, but for me, I love those challenges of can I get 4 hours, 3 hours, 2 hours of sleep and then go run 6 miles when all I've had are like three Gatorades, a Fit Aid, and maybe some water and a goo. Like my wife thinks it's absolutely ridiculous, and she always just shakes her head at me every time I mention something like that. But I don't know, like I like that kind of stuff and the camaraderie
Yeah.
piece. Of a relay of say 6, 8 guys that are just in it together. I feel like that's where my running is kind of evolved to, if you will, is it being a connection piece and a way to grow as guys, and how do we become better husbands, better dads, better bosses, or better leaders, whatever it might be. How do we get better at that? And I think those are great moments to grow in that.
Yeah, no, I definitely think for me, and for definitely loads of people we've had on here, we have quite a few ultra runners we've spoken to, and you're talking to them about why is the 110th mile of a 250 run, and don't get me wrong, I've never done anything like that, but why is there any enjoyment in that? But there seems to the camaraderie, the
Sure.
people you're speaking to, and I think also it's really interesting because even if you're playing, say, whether it's baseball or football or whatever, at whatever level you're playing it at, it's one team versus another. There's a winner and there's a loser. Assuming it's not friendly, but there's a winner and a loser. Yes, you have a
Sure.
winner in these races, but if you're talking about it like that, and there's a field of 1,000, then there's 999 inverted commas losers. So that thing kind of goes out of the window unless you're an Elliot Kipchoge or something. And I think that really helps with that whole camaraderie thing. And yeah, this is for me. This is for my growth. And you know, I, I'm the one who's going to get enjoyment out of that strange moment when you're 48 kilometers into a 50K race and your legs are giving up and you're crawling along the floor for some reason. And
Sure.
nobody who
Sure.
hasn't done it can quite understand that, can they?
No. No, we have one of our board members on Empower over in South Africa. He's getting ready to do a 100 mile mutt. So it's a trail, and the elevation. I don't remember the elevation to be exact, but it's a pretty impressive run, and it's just again, it's one of those moments, and you ask why, and the real reason is because I want to see if I
Yeah.
can. I want to get on the other side of it and be able to look back at it as this moment in my life where I went outside my comfort zone. I grew. I did something that was tough, and it's just so fun to, one, have friends that are doing those things, and then just being able to watch them in it and see them come through it. And, for me, that's, I don't know, as I approach another potential marathon, and I don't know that I get to that 50 miler range. I don't know, that might take a little convincing. So I'm not sure,
Do you
but
think it's a rebellion in some ways against the generally comfortable lives that most of us live these days in comparison to our forebears?
yeah, I mean, I would say there's definitely a piece of that. I feel like I've always, back to where I would rebel against my coaches and throw water on my face to let them think I ran hard, So for me personally, I feel like there's always been a slight rebellious spirit, in there. And then just the idea, from a growth mindset of, the comfort zone, I believe there should be something. I believe every day there should be something in our lives that, challenges us and is really outside of what we could do today. There should always be something that we're striving for, and chasing after. And for me, running provides that. And these events that, like I say, when I tell my wife, she shakes her head at me, but just that pursuit of something that, if you had to do it today, you, one, would probably laugh at it and say not a chance, or that requires some intentional training to be able to do. I think there's a lot of growth in the training aspect as well.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I think that, in a lot of ways, we learn a lot more during that training phase than we do during the actual race. Of course, there's a lot of problem solving that has to happen in the race, but if you haven't trained properly for it, you're not going to be able to solve those problems. You see people who, for some crazy reason, will decide to run a marathon on no training, and they're the ones who are lying by the side of the
Yeah,
road after 8, 10 miles, and you sort of go, "Hey,
that's it.
it
That's
doesn't
it.
matter how intentional they might be on the day. If you've not done the training, you're not going to be able to do it. So yeah, learning.
No, and I mean, I've heard it say the more you bleed in training, the less you bleed on like game day.
Yeah,
And I feel like that's so true. And even being as trained as you may be, I mean, it's so good. I mean, every race has its own struggle. It's
oh
the beauty
yeah,
of it. I mean, it's, to me, that's part of what I enjoy. But it is also the commitment to training and the commitment to that day to day grind that, is going to have dividends in the future. Maybe not today. When you don't feel like lacing up the shoes and going for the run, it's going to pay for itself on race day.
yeah,
So
and I mean, in my extremely amateur runner life, I've certainly not nailed that perfect race yet. However much training I've done so
no,
far, there's always been some sort of stupid mistake I've made on the day. But I guess that's
for
one of the
sure.
reasons why you go, oh, do you know what? I'm going to have to do this again. I'm going to have to sign up for another one of these and see
That's
if
right. The pursuit of the perfect race alone will keep you
yeah,
going.
no, that's so true. So are you someone you say you like to go out with your buddies on a chassis run? Is that mainly what you do? You talk about group runs, do you head out on trails or is it pounding the pavements that you prefer?
So most of ours is, street running versus trail. We just don't have much of that, and most of our trail down here in South Carolina, it seems ironic. I always tell our team over in like South Africa, because they're like, you assume wildlife over there will be much more dangerous, right? But for here, we got, this time of year, there's gators on paths and alligators on trails. So I stick to the road. But it depends on the day. Sometimes we'll kind of program in, whether it's speed work or, the other day to mix up a 6 mile run, we did like every minute on the minute, you do 10 push ups. You know what I mean? So stuff like that. It really depends on the day. But a lot of it is conversational. The four guys that traditionally train with are all small business owners, are all guys in a similar season of life, with children from age of 3 to 12, 3 to 14. So a lot of times it is a moment to just catch up and see what other people are going through and see what they've done. And hey, I'm going through this. All right, what have you guys done? And it's back to that therapy piece and that venting piece, and that, just a collective, to know that you're not alone, and more than just physically, because a lot of times we'll run at 5:30 in the morning. It's nice to just have a couple people on the road with you at that time in the morning when it's
Yeah.
dark. But beyond that is the idea of knowing that we weren't really intended to do life alone. So to know that you're doing life with somebody else as well, it's a great part of what we do.
Yeah, yeah. How important for you, and I guess for the community you're within, you've touched on it, is that kind of running as therapy piece?
I think it's huge. I think in a world of multiple outlets of dealing with stress, some constructive, some perhaps
Hmm.
not. I think if running can be your stress relief, I think that's a healthy way.
Yeah,
And for me, it's kind of a running joke in my house that if I have a bad day at work, or something doesn't go our way, I get home and I'm a little cranky, and it just my wife instantly can tell, and she's like, "You need to go for a run." So it's one of those rhythms that we've gotten into as a family, and that I've gotten into personally, that one I never saw coming. I don't know that I saw running being a therapeutic stress reduction mechanism for me. My if I were to talk to my 18-year-old self, I'd probably be pretty disappointed, to be honest. But for me, that's what it is. And it's and if it's something really heavy and something I feel like I need to talk to somebody, I call one of the guys in my group, and like, "Hey man, you want to go hit a run?" And there's never a conversation of how long we going, how fast we going. Those discussions don't come
Hmm.
up, and then some days, if you're some days there's not much conversation. It's like a grinder. You just out there, pound some pavement, get your miles in. Other days it's, we'll have I ran a buddy of mine, Ryan, big runner, and I mean, we've done a half marathon, and it felt like it was a 3 miler, just because the conversation and just because of stuff you kind of had on your heart and had on your head, you got to get rid of. And again, I remember it very vividly. It was a Thursday, mid morning kind of run, and it was you know half 13 miles, and we get back, and my wife's like, "You could have gotten a shirt and a medal for that," and I'm like, "I got so much more out of that run than a shirt and a
Yeah.
medal," and it was big, it was impactful. So
I'm intrigued because you're obviously using it for growth. I'm guessing within your business life, there's going to be, if there's an entrepreneurial spirit there, there's generally a sort of competitive spirit somewhere within there as well. You're talking about the runs as if it's quite a relaxing thing. Is there a competitive element to the running you do as well? Or is it just a competition purely with yourself to do something rather than about times or winning or any of that other stuff?
I mean, so I'd say it's less about that for
Hmm.
sure. But then there's also moments where if I'll go out and post a 10K 6 miler at a certain pace. If I'm running a, I don't know, 8 and change or something, and I post that. Those other three guys that I run with, sure as heck, are going to try to run that 10K at or better than that
Yeah.
pace. So I mean, I would be remiss to say and share that there is no component of that. Um, but it's by no means the priority. Or if one guy, or even on a day, I'm like, we have kind of a thing, and it's not. I don't think it's unique to us. It's time on legs.
Yeah.
Like someone will put in our chat, like, TOL run this morning, and we'll just go out for 45 minutes, no pace, no thoughts. But then another morning we'll go out and we'll have a pace in mind. So there is a competitive piece. I think, like you said, with entrepreneurial spirit and even an athletic
Hmm.
background, there's always going to be that, and I don't know that I'd want to suppress that with me personally, but it's there. It's there. But also knowing that I'm not winning the Chicago Marathon anytime soon, so you got to. I think keeping it in its proper perspective is important. And I think the thrill of the hunt and the aspect of accomplishment far outweigh the individual competition.
Yeah, no, I think that's kind of quite similar to some of the mindset I've got. I will go out. I love the chatty runs, which I think is kind of the equivalent of the time on legs thing that you spoke about there. It's just go out for a certain
Sure.
distance, and we are definitely not pushing it. We're definitely not going fast today. We're going to shoot the breeze and whatever. But there are those days where I'll
Yep.
be like, "Hey, I'm going to go for it today. I'm never going to win this. I'm never going to win a race. That's not going to happen." But that doesn't matter. But I want to do as the best I possibly can within that particular moment, just to see whether I can do it. And I suppose that comes back to that running as a personal challenge thing, doesn't it?
For sure.
Yeah.
for sure. And we have guys in our group that I run with that, you know, and some of the different runs that we've done, whether it was organized through, you know, Empower or whatever it was, that are at various levels, you
Yeah,
know. So even seeing some of the, like, I have one buddy who just kind of wanted to experience the Palmetto 200, the relay. Avid lifter, you know, he owns a couple gyms, you know, and he was like, I'm not a runner. I'll never be a runner. I'm not a runner, you know. And we always, you know, we've kind of badgered him a little bit now. You know, he's buying a new pair of running shoes every other week. You know, he went from, you know, the traditional gym short length, you know, which maybe is a little bit longer. Now he's got the shorter running short. It's like, you know, it's just been kind of fun to watch his journey in running as well,
yeah,
and to be a part of that, and, you know, watch his, you know, average mile pace come down, you know, by almost 2 minutes in the past year, you know, on little things like that. It's just fun to be a part of and fun to see in someone
yeah,
else as well as that growth.
yeah.
You know,
I,
it's
I absolutely love the one of the things I most love about running is watching the other people in the group get better and improve and do things that they never thought they'd be able to do, and going down and watching them do
for
their
sure,
race and achieve their half marathon for their first time, or their 10K, or we've had people who've done a 5K for the first time, and it's like that is so incredible to be so much further than where you've come from. If you've got to the point, hey,
for
hey,
sure,
listen, if you're a great marathon runner and you can do a sub 3 marathon, then good for you. You're doing a lot of training. That's awesome. But you're kind of there. For me, I love watching the people who've improved from nothing to something incredible.
for
Yeah,
sure. I would agree with that completely,
definitely.
for
Um,
sure.
we're kind of getting towards the end of the chat, but I did
Good.
want to talk to you a little bit about, and it may not be something you do because you're talking about mainly going out with the guys and talking, but what music you may listen to if you go out and listen to music, because we have a sister podcast called What's in Your Earbuds, and that's all about what us
Yeah.
runners listen to when we're out there. And yeah, Justin, if you can think of one or two good things, maybe we can get it added to a playlist that we've got on Spotify, and it is the most eclectic
Yeah.
and ridiculous playlist you'll ever get to hear. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so if anyone heard my playlist, they'd probably say, "What is wrong with this guy?" So it is as diverse as, you know, '90s hip hop from like Wu Tang Clan. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah,
To you know, worship music that rings to my faith, you know. And I'm like, you know, but for me, you know, especially back to the baseball days, and it's kind of carried over for me. The one song that just always gets me going, and it is a song that has not really been released on an album. So Nine Inch Nails, I don't know if you've heard of
yeah,
them.
yeah, yeah.
uh, so heavy rock. So they have a song called "Perfect Drug," and this is by no means any kind of endorsement, but it basically, the premise of the song. So it's Nine Inch Nails' "Perfect Drug." It was on the Lost Highway soundtrack, which is a movie, and it basically talks to how adrenaline is the perfect drug. Is it gets dosed when you need it, and it gets dialed back when you
Yeah.
don't. And the intro on this song will, I mean, it'll make you run through a brick wall. It is one of the best intros I've ever heard. So that's probably my go-to song at the end of a race, or at the, you know, with that moment when you need something, is definitely Nine Inch Nails. But beyond that, you know, if it's a long, steady run, it's a podcast for me.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love listening to podcasts when I'm running, mainly
Yep.
because, particularly if I'm going out on my own, which I guess is when you be listening to music or anything. If I got the beats
Sure.
going, I'd just be running far too fast, and I was just running every run too fast. And I ended up getting all
Yeah,
sorts of injuries and everything. And a podcast just dials it back a little bit, and I've sort of listened along to what someone's saying rather than going to the beat of the music. Um, but
for sure. It's a great pace setter.
yeah, we'll get that. We'll get that Nine Inch Nails song added to the podcast playlist. I have to send
Yeah.
you a link. And Jason, who's producing today, is mentioning that there is a Katie Cheesman who may be a relative of yours. I don't know who's listening
She
in and has
is.
mentioned the Greatest Showman soundtrack. So I don't know whether that's her favorite or yours.
Oh, that's not. Oh, that was supposed to be a secret. That's supposed to be a secret. But I will tell you, there's a couple songs on there that get your legs moving a little quicker.
Yeah. What was your baseball entry song? Did you ever have something that
So that was, so Nine Inch Nails
uh,
was that. It was kind of the pre-game, and then, you know, if I was coming out of the pen, it was AC/DC Hell's
yeah,
Bells. You get that like that dong when that comes out. So that was probably that moment. But sadly, at I guess maybe revealing my age a bit, we didn't really have walk up songs when I played. So, but it was really out of the pen, and then in the bullpen prior to coming out and pitching, it was those types of songs that just get the blood flowing. So
Yeah, no, cool. I say I sort of hinted earlier. I just play a bit of cricket, and that's far too sedate for walk-on songs or anything like that.
yeah,
Or anything that
yeah,
exciting, but yeah, I love getting a good tune to get you going and get the blood pumping is pretty cool. Justin,
for sure.
before we kind of round things off, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to give a bit of a shout out to Empower and where people can find out a little bit more about the company and what it does, and perhaps the upcoming running event as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for considering that. So it's empowertp.org is the website. That's the same handle for our social media as well. And we are based in George, South Africa. We also have a branch in the Netherlands, and then here in the U.S. And really, what we're aimed at doing is transforming passion into action. So we do that in a multitude of ways through entrepreneurial development, as well as community champions. So individuals in the community that are doing great things. How do we continue to grow them so they continue to be impactful? And we do that in a multitude of ways, but relevant to running in November, we do Run It Back. So follow along social media, follow along on the website, and we would love to get you involved in some capacity with that, just to grow awareness, and also to grow the impact that running has had for us as an organization, and what I believe it can have around the world. Just uniting a group of people that just want to do more, whether it be physically or socially, and want to have an impact. So check it out, empowertp.org. Website's up there. All the information is there. And then any questions, or feel free to reach out through email on there or DMs on social. We would love to get you involved in anything we're doing. So thank
No,
you.
awesome. We'll get that all added to the show notes as well, so people can pick it all up there if they've
Perfect.
not been able to do it just now. I think it's a wonderful thing you're doing there. So yeah, I want to try and help you
Thank
promote
you.
that as much as possible. And just very very quickly, one final question: what would you say to anybody, perhaps somebody who was in their mid to late teens and having to run around a track and hating running? What would you say to them about why they should stick with the sport and end up loving it?
I mean, for me, that's interesting because there are days where I don't feel like I love it. But for me, would be the fact that that's a great question. Actually, I feel like you stumped me here a little bit. I'm glad you saved us to the end. This would have been bad in the middle. For me, is the idea of running doesn't have to be a punishment. Right? Anything you do, you can enjoy in the right perspective. So that I think that would be it for me, is and learn to love the grind.
Yeah.
Love hard things. If that seems insurmountable or you don't feel like doing it, do it. Do hard things. Do hard things. It's going to benefit you in a multitude of ways. And again, your 44-year-old self will thank you tirelessly.
Great stuff, Justin. Thank you so much. That's brilliant, and thanks for
Awesome.
joining me today on the Running Tales podcast, folks. I hope you've enjoyed my chat with Justin as much as I have. Please give us a positive review or rating wherever you listen to the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. And folks, please do check out all the other wonderful shows we have on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network, because there is so much good stuff on there. The Enduring Minds podcast is just a brilliant conversation about men's mental health. I mentioned What's in Your Earbuds, Food Fight Friday. If you've never listened to that, it's the most fun you can ever have, talking about aid stations on trail runs or ultra runs, and throwing food at bears. You have to listen to it to know what I'm talking about. We've got Beyond the Finish Line with Joe Harden, where Joe talks to some absolutely brilliant people about their running stories. And Angela Hollowell talking about Melanin MVP on her podcast as well. Look, loads and loads of stuff. I've probably missed things out. It's superb. So please do check that out. If you enjoy Running Tales, check us out as well in our written format on runningtales.substack.com, where we have written versions of all of these conversations, as well as loads of other stuff as well. So listen, folks, thank you again for joining me and Justin. Thank you for your time today. I will no doubt catch you soon. We'll be back in another couple of weeks. And thank you from me, Craig, and from everyone at the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. Cheers. Bye.